What is up, everybody? It's Reverse here today. So we're going to talk about this new revelation. So apparently, the former SEGA American president said the Dreamcast legacy lives on with the Xbox. So they kind of see the Xbox as like the spiritual successor of the SEGA hardware. Since Sega ended with the Dreamcast, you kind of see the new Xbox as that new type of their like spiritual successor in a way to the and I guess in hardware making. So definitely interesting because I'm pretty sure a lot of people who had the Sega Dreamcast, they probably moved on to Xbox once that system ended. They probably moved on to like the original Xbox, Xbox 360. So definitely interesting article right here. So, and this is on pure Xbox as well. So the article starts and says, former SEGA of America president and Xbox head Peter Moore was a guest on Xbox Pioneers Creativity and Innovation panel earlier this week and spoke about the legacy of the doomed Sega Dreamcast, which I haven't had it. I didn't have the Dreamcast when it was around, but I heard people really like that Dreamcast. Like, all I mainly know that the games they had on that was like the Shenmue games, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Power Stone. Those are like the most talked about games I hear about that on that system as well, like Crazy Taxi and stuff like that. But Moore has always talked about his fondness for the console and mentioned during the discussion that the Sega team had already established a strong relationship with Microsoft at that time, and the Dreamcast utilized a Windows operating system, CE, that led to Sega and Xbox developing a report pretty early on. Okay. We started to build a report with the Xbox team and started to bring together two consoles with the synergy of online being the real key. And this is the concept of social gaming, which, and no disrespect to the Nintendos and Sonys of the time, but they were still seeing it very much as you versus me, boys in the bedroom on the couch. Moore went on to admit that the Dreamcast was ahead of its time, ultimately lost out on the PlayStation 2. But the baton was passed to Xbox, with Sega also choosing to collaborate with Microsoft as a third-party publisher. And ultimately, Moore believes that the Dreamcast legacy will still live on with Xbox today. So that's interesting. I mean, that's some pretty big praise to Xbox to say that you are able to take on our baton, to pass the baton to you to take on our legacy. Pretty much, that's some heavy stuff right there. But yeah, I always heard the Dreamcast was ahead of its time. Like I said, I never had the Dreamcast. I never had the Sega Dreamcast, but I heard it was a great system. A lot of people say it was ahead of its time, so that's interesting. Oh, okay. He explains more about how it was. He explains more about it. He says the Dreamcast was ahead of its time, and it sadly didn't quite make it the face of the impending PlayStation, flooding fear, uncertainty, and doubt that came along as they did it brilliantly. But as the Dreamcast unfortunately faded into the sunset, the baton was passed to Xbox. We started to collaborate, and we started to bring content to the Xbox. Okay, then. That's interesting. People say the Sega Dreamcast was awesome. Beautiful, always felt the same way about it being a Sega fan. Dreamcast is the only console it'll never sell. Okay. Okay, let's read some of the Twitter comments now. See what people are saying about this. The new Sega Series X. It was ahead of its time. First console to have online multiplayer. Wow, they had multiplayer. I didn't know that. I know this console had multiplayer. That's interesting. It had online multiplayer, VMU with screen display, fully functional web browser. It had a web browser too? Wow. Yeah, this definitely was ahead of its time. It had a web browser, mouse and a keyboard, motion sensor controls, DLC. They had DLC back then? Wow. Video chat with camera / mic. Yeah, I don't think the PS2 had most of the stuff in the PS2 didn't have. The third place legacy, that's for sure. Wow, this guy's super salty. You guys seems obsessed about first, second, and third place. That is always kind of weird to me. Like, why do they care about what place these consoles, what ranking they have? I guess in a generation about sales, because it's kind of like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, etc. I mean, who cares what place they're in? They always care about making money. It's like, I'm pretty sure McDonald's is probably the first place on all these burger joints, but the other companies are still around because they're still making millions upon millions on dollars. So it's like, who really cares what place they end up being in at the end of the day? Sega helped Microsoft make the first Xbox. It's nice to have the official confirmation of this in a way. I moved to Xbox from Dreamcast back in the day thanks to the similarities, and it was a worthy swap. Of course, I already knew this from the beginning. This is why Dreamcast guy has to change his name. We demand it. Yeah, because you can't have your name be named after the Dreamcast. You kind of hate on Xbox every chance you get. It's like, definitely can't do that. Microsoft helped Sega with the Dreamcast. Too bad Sega was pig-headed and didn't allow the Dreamcast to play DVDs because that's what's killed it. Dreamcast had better games than PS2. Later hackers made it where you could watch movies on the Dreamcast. Shaking my head at Sega. The Dreamcast simply released too early for its time. It sure does. Anyway, felt that way. The third place legacy, that's for sure. Is it the same guy? I think Sony owns that title now in terms of gaming and overall consumer-friendly choices. That seems somewhat obvious to everyone that just based. That seems somewhat obvious to everyone just based off the games that were available. But Dreamcast will always have a special place in my heart. So many memories. Now release the Dreamcast game for Xbox. Yeah, they should. I mean, if they speaking this probably about an Xbox, I mean we could see some more. I mean they already are. I mean they kind of already are releasing a lot of these Sega games on Xbox. Especially like the Yakuza series is now official on Xbox now. So yeah, and they kind of are changing that narrative by putting a lot of Sega games on Xbox that wasn't on before. Can you imagine an exclusive section in Game Pass? Can I start this acquisition rumor part again? People think this will be another acquisition again. I think they might acquire Sega. I don't know because of this interview. It would be cool to have backwards compatibility with the Dreamcast. It's almost impossible with a good relationship between the two companies. Anything can happen. I always said the Dreamcast was the first Xbox for me. I always saw Xbox as a continuation of Sega hardware. Dreamcast was my absolute favorite console back in the day. It only lasted a year, but then the OG Xbox came out right as Sega exited the hardware game, and I fell in love. Still need a remake/remaster port of Skies of Arcadia. I've always felt that the Xbox is a spiritual successor to the Dreamcast. I wonder if we can only play Sega Dreamcast games on Xbox. I would absolutely buy a Dreamcast Mini. Had one when I was very young and used to play Shenmue all the time. Okay. Come on, I want the Saturn games or just China Force 3 and Panzer Dragoon Saga. Also, former corporate vice president of Microsoft's Interactive Entertainment Division during the OG and Xbox 360 days until the ring of death anyways. He's been around the block a few times. Xbox and Sega are both dead. What? What state of delusion does this guy have? What is he talking about? I'm like, they are both thriving and making games right now. So I don't know what he's talking about with that tweet right there. Ben felt like this. Glad he does too. The spirit lives on with the Xbox. It would be awesome if Dreamcast games were made backwards compatible. I still have my Dreamcast, but the laser on it is about as loud as the original 360 fan and laser. Explain to me how this isn't common knowledge, because a lot of people probably didn't have the Dreamcast. Like I myself didn't have the Dreamcast. Didn't know this much information about the Dreamcast, how many similarities it had with the Xbox hardware. So this isn't common knowledge. A lot of people, like I had a PS2 during that generation. That's the only system I had during that generation was popular. I didn't have an Xbox or a GameCube or a Dreamcast, so a lot of people didn't know the similarities that the Dreamcast had with the Xbox at the end of the day. Dreamcast was pretty boring. If you already had a PlayStation and a Nintendo, Sega sucks. Okay. So he came to... I just don't get it. He just really came on this thread talking about how the Dreamcast legacy moved on with Xbox. Just say it sucks. That's this guy is definitely the life of the party, it seems. I mean, it was pretty obvious, and I knew years ago after all the focus of Xbox and online multiplayer and the first controller of Xbox, it was literally the Dreamcast controller. Yeah, in a way, I guess you could kind of say it did have the same shape of the Dreamcast controller, especially compared to like the PlayStation controller. Oh, let's see. I often maintain that one of the reasons I became so enamored with Xbox because I grew up playing the Genesis and Dreamcast, and Xbox is basically just Sega Part 2. Best tweet of the day, comments in this section is pretty awesome. Most of the comments is pretty awesome. There's a few salty comments up in here, but most of the comments are pretty wholesome. I gotta agree with that. I'm still sad to see that the Series S is called the Dreamcast 2. Dude, that's great. Exactly what I've been saying since I became an OG Xbox owner. The natural transition was for me anyway. Okay, so I'm gonna conclude it right here. Definitely want to see your thoughts down below. Maybe you are owner of the original Dreamcast, or you played Sega consoles before in the past. Do you kind of feel that what this guy is saying, that the Xbox was kind of the spiritual successor in a way, that the baton was passed to Xbox to kind of hold on his legacy of the Dreamcast and with the Xbox right now as it is? Definitely want to see your thoughts about this down below. Leave a like for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and peace.